Hello, everybody. Welcome to our March virtual tasting for the Forgotten Grapes Wine Club. It's been so busy, I have to remind myself what month it is, but it is March. And we are so excited to be joined by Stephy Terrizzi. Stephanie, do you have a preference or?
I always go by Steffi. Only
Okay.
my mom called me Stephanie when she was really mad at me.
We
So
do not want to acquit ourselves with your mother, so we will stick with Steffi for this one. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, we have everybody muted. So if you have any questions for Steffi, any comments, of course, any food pairings, we love to have those. Looking at you, Matt and Carrie, I know you will have those. Throw those into the chat, and we will, of course, include those in the conversation as we go. At the end, we'll unmute everybody if you want to ask Steffi some questions yourself. Of course, the Festival of Forgotten Grapes, as we have mentioned in the last couple of emails, is coming up on June 29th. As it turns out, Giornata is going to be one of our featured wineries there, which we are very, very excited. Not only will they be pouring some of these wines, but they're going to be bringing in some of their fun other Forgotten Grape wines for that event. Tickets will be going on sale very, very soon, possibly by the very beginning of next month. No promises on that, but keep an eye out, and we'll definitely let you guys be the first to know in our emails, or maybe even a special email that will come out.
Maybe I'll even put the link to the website that's live but not official at the end of the chat so you all can get a preview.
That's true. And you can see all the wineries that we have lined up at this point. We've got a really, really fun lineup. We're very excited about all of the wineries we're going to be pouring at the Festival of Forgotten Grapes. But tonight we're here to talk about grapes that may be forgotten here in the United States, but in Italy they are very, very common. Although in Italy there are, gosh, what's the number now, Allison? It's like over 2,000 different grapes grown in Italy.
Yeah, but there are probably, I don't know, what would you say, like 1,000 that are qualified, Steffi, that have been identified?
Some of them have multiple aliases. Same grape, different name.
Depends. And then there are others like Trebbiano that has like 10 different wines that are called Trebbiano Day, and they're not related to each other.
Yeah, or
Trebbiano D, Trebbiano D, Trebbiano D.
Yeah, or the different clones of Sangiovese. There's at least like 7 or 8, probably more different clones of Sangiovese out there, of course. So,
and there are tons of obscure grapes, even by Italian standards.
Yes. So Italy really ground zero when it comes to forgotten grapes and the forgotten grape movement. And of course, we are so lucky to have an expert in Italian grapes and one of the original Italian grape growers, or I guess one of the original modern Italian grape growers here in Paso Robles, because Paso Robles was founded by a lot of Italian settlers, the Rodas, the Picentes, who, planted Italian varietals to begin with, but then moved on to other things. And then we are thankful to have the Terrizzis, especially Steffi Terrizzi, back as one who really brought Italian grapes to the forefront in Italy. So Stephanie, thank you for joining us. Steffi, thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And we always start our virtual tastings by asking you, what is the most memorable bottle of wine that you've ever opened?
Ooh.
And the occasion.
And the occasion.
And the date, and the time, and who was present.
No, just the occasion.
What glassware were you in? Where were you sitting?
I mean, there definitely has been a few, and there are different, I think, aha moments with all wines. But I think one of my first tastes of Barolo definitely kind of, can I say, put the noose around my neck and drag me into the wine industry.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it's it was Mascarello, Giuseppe Mascarello Barolo, the Monprivato, and we still celebrate this wine on anniversaries. It seems like it's getting more and more expensive and a little more obscure and harder to get, but we have connections, so we try to drink it with really, really, really special occasions. Maybe not even every year, maybe like every 3 years.
Wow.
But very special marriage, anniversary, birthday, special, just something really special.
Yeah, I feel like you need to figure out how to bring in like, a palate level of that just to have it stockpiled. And
who's saying they don't?
That's true. Yeah, we don't know how far
when we first, I bet when I was introduced to this wine, it was probably $45 a bottle, and now I don't even I don't look. It hurts to.
Gotcha.
So
Before we kick off the discussion, we want to make sure everybody's drinking. So please open up your white wine if you're going to already. We kind of need to see what everybody's got. Does everybody have Fiano? How many have Fiano? Raise your hand. Or Vermentino. If you've got Vermentino, kind of raise your hand. All right. All right. Does anybody have a bottle of Fiano out there? Is it just me? Okay. Well, that's a good sign.
you're so special.
I don't know how I got it. Yes, exactly. There was a small error. So there may be, if you're watching this on replay, if you got the Fiano, we'll touch on it briefly after we talk about Vermentino, but it seems like the majority of folks got the Vermentino here, which is great. I apparently have some sort of, magical space Jesus ability where I can turn one variety into the other, which I'm super excited about. I'm going to work
I have
on
the Vermentino, so that's okay.
I'm going to go down to Trader Joe's and see if I can turn some $2 Chuck into Legrand or Giroldago. Right, exactly. Or Barolo, yes. Or maybe some Premier Cru Burgundies and sell those on the open market and make some money. That'd be a fun little short film right there. So let's talk a little bit about the Vermentino and kind of also talk about how you got into winemaking, Sammy, because I have to admit, like reading through your website and a couple of other web pages I found on you, you and I are right around the same age, so 34, which is great. And but I feel like I have done absolutely nothing in my life compared to everything that you have done in this world. So walk us through your journey as we enjoy this Vermentino as to how you got into the world of wine, how you started in Wisconsin and made your way out here to California.
I did, yeah. I'm a Midwesterner, so I was born in Rockford, Illinois, and raised there. My grandparents lived just on the other side of the Wisconsin border. So for those of you that think this is a flyover area, I'll explain. It's I feel like Wisconsin, Illinois border, Chicago, Milwaukee, all that kind of in there. It should be really its own state. it's not really like the rest of. It's not.
They should just call it the Dells.
Yeah. Yes. And my father was a professional water skier for Tommy Bartlett. If anybody knows the Wisconsin Dells, my dad was a barefoot water skier. But anyway, so I kind of came in through this from the restaurant side of things. I started kind of working just, I don't know, because it was kind of a job and it was a little more than minimum wage and you got tips. And I think I started working at the age of like 12. I was coat check girl at our local country club. My uncle was one of the managers there. And then slowly started bussing tables. I worked the dish pit sometimes.
So unreported child labor is how you got started.
Yes. And I also detasseled corn. I did do that on summers, but, and I think we got paid, it was something that,
like $1 a bushel or something.
No, yeah, it was like $1.70 an hour or something like that.
That was a lot back then.
It was.
Not that it was that long ago.
Yes, I had to, 34 years ago.
That buys you like 7 games of Space Invaders. That's a lot.
So yeah, I eventually started working at more serious restaurants. I took hospitality very, very serious. I have a third level, I'm a third level sommelier with WSET. Yeah, hospitality is a big deal to me. So that's kind of where this all began. I was getting finished with school a little bit, thinking, what do I want to do next? I went to UW La Crosse, finished up at Madison, and I always thought I'd be a doctor. So I studied for the MCAT and yeah, just was going to go to med school. And then I just thought, I really hate snow. Anything in the world, I hate snow.
Said about a third of all Midwesterners ever.
Yes. And I can stand, I don't mind cold, but it's like Chicago snow. It's
Which isn't snow. That's just slush and like brown. Yeah.
it's brown. It's not anything like what's in Colorado or Tahoe or any place you would want to be with snow.
I
So
grew up in Indiana. I know what you're talking about. Northern Indiana.
yes. So I was just in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, and it was beautiful. And I know it was the first warm weekend because it was still like 52 degrees, but everyone had on t-shirts. So you know it was like, it was really cold, and then you got this, people went outside and you're like, that's ridiculous. Like I still have on 2 puffer jackets and I've got one extra in the car. And yeah.
Those were my least favorite days when I lived on the East Coast, was in like March or early April, when you look outside and the sky is blue, the sun is shining, there's not a cloud in the sky, and you go outside and it's like 0 or like 2 degrees because there's no cloud cover to insulate. You're like in shorts and flip-flops because you think it's going to be warm and you're freezing your
and you're
booty
wrong.
off.
But yeah, so I kind of came through this, the whole revelation of winemaking through food. And to me, food was always the star and the wine was the condiment on the table. So for me, doing wine pairings, thinking about, wow, what goes well with this, it kind of just goes hand in hand with, I like to eat.
So in your hospitality days, in those kind of collegiate and post-collegiate days, when you're working at restaurants, were you working already with Italian grapes? Were you getting yourself familiar with them? Or was it more the traditional, Bordeaux's, Burgundies, kind of the standard wines of that period?
I seem to always work in Italian restaurants. I mean, I feel like there's kind of been an Italian food renaissance in the United States right now. And I feel like it kind of maybe got boring and some new trends came in and new kind of things. And but I've always loved Italian wines. And I've always worked for like very small restaurants owned by Italians. I was never family, however, so you can always only go so far in the organization. So I would always become like a manager and then help with the wine buying, the bar stuff, and then after a couple of years, kind of take off and find something new. So that was kind of through school at the same time, and yeah, and then I worked. So I moved out to California, ended up in Santa Rosa. And wanted to learn more about wine, being in wine country, and started taking some tasting classes at the local Santa Rosa Junior College, and found they had a viticulture program. And first day I walked out into class, and it was honestly in the middle of a field of grapes. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing office. This is really cool. This is, and a lot of my science background comes through to vine physiology, diseases. I mean, all of that stuff kind of goes hand in hand with what I'd studied.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about, winemaking, because you and your husband, Brian, both make the wine, but your specialty has really been, in the grape growing and the vineyard management and tending to the grapes. And I know that's kind of how you got your foothold into the industry, was on the vineyard management side of things.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So, Vermentino, how did you guys decide to work with this grape? It is, it's one of those grapes that I feel like it's been on the cusp of becoming hugely popular here in the Paso Robles area for years. Everybody I know is talking about it, wants to work with it, and yet it doesn't seem like there's many new plantings of it, and there should be. It's such a grape that really works well in this environment.
I completely agree. So Vermentino, we actually stumbled upon actually at a winemaker get together, and oh gosh, now I'm blanking on his name. He's also 34 though, and
we're all 34.
Maker from Wild Horse Winery.
Oh, Ken Volk.
Clussy.
Ken had sold it, and then
Clussy.
super zen. He would always be like, "Hey,
is it Chris Ferrara?
Isn't it Clussy wine?
No, he lives across the street now, but he worked in the vineyards there.
Right.
Why can't I remember his name? Anyway, he's a really great guy and just really very zen, like I said. And we saw him at a party, and he kind of floated over to us, and he's like, "Hey, Steffi, how you doing?" have you ever thought about making Vermentino or Frulano? And I said, yeah, I would love to make Vermentino or Frulano. And as it turned out, Wild Horse had about a half acre of Frulano and about a third acre of Vermentino right outside of their tasting room across the parking lot where you would park. Those vines behind there were those grapes.
Okay.
So I asked a couple more questions and I said, what are you doing with Vermentino planted at Wild Horse? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And he said, well, Kenny Voke, when he owned it, these cuttings were shipped over from France to Tablas Creek, who they partner with a nursery there. And they thought at the nursery in France, in the Languedoc region, where they call Vermentino Rolle, R-O-L-L-E, that this grape would do really good in Paso Robles on the chalky soil. So they sent the Haas family a box of cuttings, and they looked in the box and they said, maybe not on our property, but we'll find someone. So they thought
if it doesn't go into Chateau Neuf, we won't use it.
So, first person that stepped forward, of course, was Ken Voke. And he said, I'll grow that. And so he grabbed the cuttings, threw them in. They were own rooted, and just kind of multiplied everything. This vineyard was honestly a jungle. It is super flat, kind of sandy loam soils right there. It doesn't get super warm. It gets a lot of fog kind of in the early part of the day. It blows off, it gets hot, then it gets cold again. It's a great place for Vermentino. But these vines, they were on a watering calendar. The water was flipped on for 10 hours every Tuesday, turned off, and these things were huge. These clusters were probably 2 of my head together.
Oh, wow.
They were huge. But we just loved it. It was really fun. We went to, when they pulled those out, they put Blaufränkisch in its place. We went to take cuttings, and they were severely diseased with red blotch. So we decided, let's not move that around on our property if we have to. So I said, we'll just get some from the nursery. It'll be fine. Well, apparently everything had red blotch in it here in California.
Oh,
so to get certified new planting material, it had to come from either the Languedoc region. Most of the mother blocks, like I said, were all diseased. So they had to kind of reissue all this. So by protocol, these cuttings come in, they're given to UC Davis, UC Davis and USDA, and sometimes Plant Foundation Services runs tissue tests. They make sure there's no diseases. They can actually eventually clean it up over time, which is really cool. But this took some time. So a couple of years went by and we're like, oh, we don't have any Vermentino. So we found some Fiano, we found some other different things along the way, and now there's a whole bunch of it. So we did recently put some new clones. Vermentino is grown all over Italy, most notably in Tuscany and the island of Sardinia. There is some other special clones around too that are really interesting. Ryan Peace at Paso Robles is doing the Ligurian clone, which is very exciting. It tastes very different than ours, but not anything less exciting. And then some of the newer ones we put in, we actually kind of focused on that Tuscan clone.
Okay. Yeah, I came to first know Vermentino through the Sardinian versions of it, because it seemed like that was where I found. And I have had Ryan's. I know he just released his new Vermentino. I did not know that was Ligurian, but that's really interesting. I'm going to have to go do some compare and contrasting of those two types.
I actually came to Vermentino through Liguria. So, because the first time I had it, I was in Liguria, and you see the vines that are on the hills and stuff, and
leaning over your cars, like hitting it as you're going to go by.
That was my first introduction to it, with some Ligurian pesto.
Yeah.
Oh, what a good pairing. So let's talk about food.
Yeah, let's start.
So this wine typically has screaming acid, and This is a 2022. I don't know if, I think all of California was like this, or maybe just Paso, but September of 2022, it was like 100 degrees every day. And then it barely got into like the low 70s at night for like 3 weeks straight. This particular vintage does not have quite the acidic backbone that most Vermentinos have. And that's really just due to the vintage that we had. We just bottled the 2023, and actually that's what you guys were supposed to try. And I was worried having it only in the bottle for 10 days that it could be a big bully.
Yeah.
So we went with the 22, but the 23 has that acid where you take a sip, you can feel it down the sides of your mouth. This one is definitely more a party pleaser, if you will. But yeah, it's really delicious. But this was great with pesto and any herb. I mean, it can, anytime you would want to drink Sauvignon Blanc, just drink this Vermentino instead.
Nice.
With, first of all, where did you source this Vermentino from? Is it from your own vineyard?
Yeah, so we did 2 custom plantings. One of them is up in the San Miguel district, but off San Marcos Road, if anyone's familiar with Paso. It's got some heavier clay soils. It's relatively flat, not a whole lot of rocks or anything, but it is organic without certification. And then we planted another one right around the corner from our house. So these are mostly from those 2. And then the third source that we've had for a while was Clavo Cellars' original planting. And it's up on Welsona Road, sandy soils, super hot. But yeah, you can really control the vigor with not watering or watering.
Yeah.
And do you have any Vermentino? You have a 1 acre property, vineyard on your property, right?
We have 5 acres.
5 acres.
So
do you have Vermentino planted there?
No Vermentino at the home site.
Ah.
We've got Furlano, Ribolla Gialla, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, 3 different clones of Nebbiolo, and then Nero de Troia. And we will very soon have Cesenese and Nerello Mascalese.
Oh, wow.
I've actually seen them because Steffi, being the green thumb that she is, she doesn't just buy and put them onto the rootstock. Like, she's growing the little babies in little cups all along her house. And so one day they're going to grow up and get planted into the vineyard.
We have a shantytown nursery on the side of our garage. Yes, it is true.
I didn't say shantytown.
Like shantytown.
Better vines, vines in little cups than pickup trucks on blocks.
Well, I mean, some of them we put in the little cups, and then some of them we plant right in the ground, and then we have a big kind of old nasty bin from the winery that we put almost like a cactus mix into. And if we get a lot of rain, and so between the 3 areas, something grows amazing. I mean, they don't all 3. It's like at home, we either have a year where we have great tomatoes or great peppers, but we never have a year that we have both. It's either too windy, it's not hot enough. It's not, I mean, one of them is grumpy. So we kind of take that same approach where we kind of put some cuttings out in 3 different areas and kind of treat them different ways, and one of them works out.
And does this wine see any oak? Is it 100% stainless?
100%
concrete?
stainless steel. I honestly don't know if this has gone through any malolactic fermentation. We don't inoculate. We just kind of let it go natural. But yeah.
But there is some lees time, right?
A little.
The wine has a little, yes. And it might be the climate that you were saying for 22, but it's got this nice kind of rounder texture with the acidity. It's a more coating.
Yeah, I always say it's kind of oily. I mean, that's just the grape itself actually has that oily texture to it. And I think it makes you not miss any oak if you really look for oak in white wine. But I think it's just delicious and yummy. And yeah.
Who's go with Indian food?
I think you could, and I think, I don't know if it's the lack of acidity a little bit in this. Oh God, there's fruit flies. Sorry, I'm at the winery. And that's what we love about the first freeze is that we give up tomatoes and basil, but we also kill most of the fruit flies.
This is true.
Yeah, wait, what was the question?
Oh, no, I was saying, do you think this would pair with Indian food?
Oh, I think you could because there is a little touch of residual sugar in here. I mean, just a tiny bit. I don't think it's obnoxious, and I wouldn't call this wine sweet. But I think, especially like a curry, that's not too spicy.
I mean, I could definitely see this with like a butter chicken type of dish or a
With
saag
like
paneer, like
lemon.
something with that creamy Indian cheese, I think would be phenomenal.
And of course, we will add that Matt paired it with summer spaghetti and garlicky shrimp.
Mm-hmm.
And said it was so good.
Awesome.
So
that does sound good. What time is dinner?
exactly. Whenever you want. So growing up, did you always have a green thumb? Were you always horticulturally inclined, or is that something that really sprouted in you, pun intended, once you got to California and Santa Rosa and got into the vines?
You know, my grandparents had an organic dairy farm, and so I think I was always kind of growing things. My parents had a huge garden. We lived in town, and honestly, I think it was close to a half acre in size. But we grew beets, we grew peas, we grew, I mean, all kinds of different, not much lettuces, a ton of rhubarb. Yeah, and I think I was in the garden a lot, eating the tomatoes, the peas just raw. As a kid, I loved beets, broccoli. Yeah, I always have loved vegetables. But when I came to California, I think the weather here is more conducive to I'm just outside a lot more here than I ever was in the Chicago area. And there's a little room in the backyard to kind of, even plant, a couple tomato plants or a couple this. And so first couple of years, I just bought seeds and planted them. And then now I've been saving seeds for tomatoes. It's a lot harder for like bell peppers and those sort of things, but it's really interesting. California is amazing just with the just all the different flowers and plants, and there are things I have never seen before. And even last year with all the rain, there were wildflowers that I haven't ever seen in 10 years, and they exist. Oh, yeah. It's great. So I think I'm in awe by the nature here in California, just living somewhere else. My daughter's in Boston right now living, and it's her second year there. And she called this year and she said, I think this is a deal breaker because there's something happening called freezing rain. I don't like it. I said, did you not have freezing rain? It happens every year. I mean, it's not like it's a once in a 10-year thing.
Yeah.
She was like, I'm pretty sure I want to come back to California.
But wait a minute. Just tell everyone what your daughter's doing in Boston.
Oh, she's a classic trained ballerina. She is finishing high school there, and she's in the pre-professional training division with Boston Ballet. So she loves it, but she's home for spring break right now. So we were in Santa Barbara today for an audition with State Street Ballet. So fingers crossed. But
and she has twins, so the other one is also as accomplished, but not in ballet.
Yes. She's a tennis player, high jumper, triple jumper, soccer player, FFA leader, she shows sheep, she breeds sheep. And she's she's president of the Women in Engineering Society this year. So
is she the future of Giornata?
I don't know. We have to kick them out, and then if they ever want to come back, then they're allowed to. But
prodigal daughter, I love it. Yes, or the caged bird syndrome.
But don't forget, Steffi and Brian are only 34, so they have a long career ahead of them.
That's true. Speaking of Brian, so you were at Santa Rosa Junior College, but then you made your way down to Fresno State. And I believe that's where you met Brian.
To go back to school and kind of I thought I was going to do like a post-bac with winemaking, and I looked at Davis, I looked at Fresno State, and I looked at Cal Poly. So those were kind of the three schools that were doing wine school, which seems like it's a joke, doesn't it? But it's not. It's very serious. And I decided to go to Fresno State. And when I got down there and started talking with my professors, I had missed a music credential, and I never graduated from UW-Madison. So I tried to transfer everything in, and so I did a double major with enology and viticulture, and a double minor with plant science and ornamental horticulture. So it was really fun. By second year I was there.
Ornamental horticulture, is that
Wait,
like
wait.
Italian cypresses and hedges and the like
Well,
topiaries?
yeah, it's honestly
Viticulture and what for your major? Viticulture and
Enology.
enology. And then for your double minor was?
It was chemistry and ornamental horticulture.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
I just imagine like your thesis is, turn this hedge into a hippo in a ballerina costume. Go.
And what about that music course? Did you ever take it?
I did. I took it at Fresno State.
Oh, good. Was it something fun like, hip hop in the modern world, or, the history of grunge, like 89 to 94?
We had a whole new set of capstone classes that I had to take. So I felt like I was like this old person sitting and I was 27, I think, which
just 7 years ago.
But I was sitting in this class, and it's all with like 18-year-old kids, and one of them was animals in society. So we had to write a lot of papers and a lot of different things. So we could choose our own. So we would get this very broad category, like write about something about animals in society and how it relates. So I tried to pick the most bizarre topics ever, because I was thinking, as a professor, you have to read through all these awful papers it has to be so boring. So if you put in this like jazz hands in the middle of there, and that just makes people laugh, and I mean, that would be the best thing. So
did you get that?
Yeah, I did get through Fresno State, and yes.
Gotcha.
So how'd you meet Brian?
So Brian, also returning student to Fresno State. So it was my last year there and his first year, and there's something called the Enology Society. So it was a wine tasting that was put on every Thursday night, and we were both voted in to be officers that were acquisitions officers. So we basically had to call wineries and ask for free wine as research for students to learn more about wine. So when I first met him, we were told that a lot of students were coming in. They started the enology program started going to job fairs, trying to recruit more people. I mean, sometimes there was like 8 people in a class. I mean, that was just very, very small. And it was intimate, and you got a ton of hands-on experience, but they probably weren't covering their costs. So they went out to all these job fairs, got all these people, even said to people, hey, if you want to be a dental hygienist, come into this way and then transfer over. You just got classes, like trying to pull people in that way.
Like the forestry department at UC Berkeley. That used to be the way to get into Berkeley, was apply for forestry, and then you can go be a business or communications major.
Exactly. So they said, we were told, hey, come in when you're here during the summer, during your research projects and doing all this stuff and in the building. If you see a new face, make a point to stop, introduce yourself, make them feel welcome. And, so I saw this guy, and he had on this awful Arizona Wildcats tank top. It was all ripped, and he was sweaty. And I was like, he had a hat on or visor on. And I was like, hey, what's your name? I'm Steffi. It's really nice to meet you. And he's like, hi, I'm Brian, da, da, da. And so then about 3 days later, I saw him, and he was wearing glasses, and his hair was combed, and he had a collared shirt on and like nice shoes. And so I went up to him, I'm like, hi, are you new? My name is Steffi. It's really nice to meet you. And he's like, I'm Brian, and we've already met. And I'm like, And so then the next time I saw him, he had a different look all around again. And so I introduced myself a third time, and he was very mean. And he said, I know, you told me all. I mean, he was just very. And
you have to kind of meet Brian to understand Brian.
He was very gruff, and I was like, well, he's not a very fuzzy person. So I tried to distance myself from him a little bit. And then we were both voted in as these acquisitions officers. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be the longest year of my life, because what am I going to do? And so the first meeting that we had, I was late because I was working in a restaurant and I had to come afterwards. And so he came in and said the only open chair was next to Brian. And I'm like, ugh. So I went, I sat down, and the next morning my stomach hurt because I was laughing so hard. And you know what? He's not a funny person, and he's never made me laugh since. I'm just kidding.
This is truly the stuff though of like a Netflix rom-com, right?
But we would study together. We were both in biochemistry, and I was getting an A and he was flunking. And so we would study for tests together. And one night when he said, hey, do you want to study for this quiz? And I said, yeah. And so I went over, and no one else was there, and he was cooking. And Brian is an amazing cook. So he made pasta, and actually with some olives and some oranges in with it, and chicken. And ever since then, it's all history from there.
Wow.
Which is not going to be a surprise. How many of you are familiar with Giornata to begin with before this virtual? Okay. All right, well,
Stacey.
Stacey comes on screen just to tell us that.
Yes.
How many of you have been up to Paso Robles to Tin City? So one of the things that you will hear a little story about, but they also are the owners of probably one of the best pasta companies ever. I'm a big fan. Organic, good for the body, and have a restaurant and a little store. So food is definitely a big part of their life up in Paso.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into the transition from winemaking to, building your empire. Probably when we get to the Barbera, but for now we should jump into our next wine, which is the 2023 OrangoTango. And I know everybody has this. I'm surprised you haven't been hit with the cease and desist from, is it Kiss FM that does the OrangoTango concert every year? So.
We have a trademark.
Smart.
Because with business, with winemaking and all of this, it is a business at the end of the day. And we learned our lesson one time. So yes, so we trademark any of the fanciful names, just so it protects us later.
That is smart. I did the same with Paso Seco. So we are locked in with that just to make sure nobody can ever swipe that from us. But I will admit, and this is a wine that on first surface, when we came in and tasted with you and you presented this wine to me, I was vehemently against serving it, simply because I'm not a huge fan of the gimmicky names of wines. I get it, and I understand there's a market for it and whatnot, but I generally tend to avoid them because they cause more disappointment than anything else.
Yes.
Looking at you, Cardinal Zin, Seventh Zin, et cetera, et cetera. But no, this wine blew me away when I tasted it, and I think it will for you guys. And obviously the name makes sense when you realize that this is your skin contact blend of 3 Italian white wines. And
also, Steffi, I had written about you guys prior to meeting you, but the first time we actually ever sat down was the time we went to Paso Market Watch when I was with Robert Camuto.
Yes.
And we sat down and they pulled out this wine and we paired it with oysters, and wow. Wow, it was so good.
I was trying to think, I was like, was that our first meeting? It was our first meeting. You're right.
In person, yeah.
And then like 2 weeks later, I saw you again, and it was just like and I was like, oh my gosh, it was very exciting.
Allison tends to be like mold in the refrigerator. Even when you think you're rid of it, it reemerges and you can't get rid of it.
Oh, you should turn that up.
Yeah, exactly.
I can say that most people in this chat would bitterly disagree with you on that, right?
That's
Matt,
fair.
there you go, Matt, other Matt, Stacey.
When it comes to Allison, you've got the bitter part right. But let's talk a little bit about the OrangoTango. So, you're working with these Italian grapes, And at what point did you decide, we're going to do a skin contact version of this, and then we're going to do a blended skin contact version of a white wine?
Well, so when we were at Fresno State, we actually did a little research project with skin maceration times, and we chose to do whites instead of reds. The first kind of orange wine I ever had was the Movia from Slovenia, and I kind of took a couple sips, and I was just very intrigued by it because these were flavors I've never had out of a wine glass before. It was really exciting for me, and I really started doing a little bit of a deep dive into these amber or orange wines. And with white wines, the grapes come in and you just basically squish them, you take the juice and you get rid of the skins and everything else, and you just focus on that. But all the flavor is actually in the skins. I mean, that's where the color and the flavor comes from in red wines. Yeah. So we kind of started thinking, what if we did some orange wines? And we were talking to Philip Hart from Ambeth Estate, who lives the hill, behind or in front of us or to the side of us. I'm very disoriented wherever it went at our house, but he's the next hill over. And he said, hey, I want to get 4 amphoras and a container holds 6. Do you guys want to buy 2? And I said,
I believe they're amphora.
Yes, amphora or plural. And I said, of course we do. That would be amazing. At the time, we had a lot of the Numblock concrete eggs. And they're super cool, but they're French and we're Italian. So the amphora come from Italy, and it's just a much better piece of our story. So those came over in 2010 or 11, I can't remember. And we got 2. And so we started doing Vermentino and then in one, and then Pinot Grigio in the other. So we started making these orange wines, and really we only make usually up to 50 cases maximum, just because those amphoras only hold so much. And our East Coast distributor came to us about 3 or 4 years ago and said, I want an orange wine, but I want an orange wine with training wheels. I want an orange wine that tastes good, that if nobody has ever had an orange wine, that you would pour this for them and they wouldn't go, I hate orange wine, and have it be the end of it. So this is kind of what we came up with. So we don't add yeast to any of our wines into the grapes when they come in. Everything goes through spontaneous fermentation and I guess if you're Australian, you can call it wild ferment.
Wild ferment.
Wild ferment. And so they're sometimes co-fermented, but usually they seem to come in at different times. So they're fermented separately. We kind of shove them together. This is about 6 weeks of skin contact, which is a long time. And it's got that little kind of sun tea kind of finish to it. There's definitely tannin there at the finish. Almost a little like marmalade and maybe some orange peel. I mean, for me, every time I smell it, I'm like, it's like Fanta soda. I don't know. It just has
What are the grapes in this?
This is Falangina, Vermentino,
and Fiano, I believe.
Fiano.
Yeah.
Because what's really amazing about it, it's everything you're saying, and it's got the texture, and it's got that kind of tea thing that you get with the skin contact. But the floral aromatics are so prevalent.
Yeah.
After 6 weeks of skin contact, you haven't lost any of the floral citrus notes.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you get a lot of like fresh orange juice on the mid palate of this, but then on the finish, it's that orange pith, orange rind, kind of that hint of bitterness that counteracts that kind of juicy sweetness, but it's very mouthwatering. And I mean, the acidity is great on this. Are you still, since this is with training wheels and obviously with a distributor, you're doing larger amounts, did you buy more amphora, or are you doing this?
This actually doesn't see any amphora. So okay. We actually, this is fermented in plastic tea bins, pressed off after 6 weeks, blended, put into stainless steel drums, tanks, only stainless steel.
Okay.
So, and then we get this in bottle last week of January, so very quick turnaround. And this has very quickly become the wine that we make the most of. And it is a little gimmicky name. But you know what? I
Gimmicks
think
sell.
it reflects, sometimes you just want a drink
Yeah.
with dinner. You don't want to overthink it. You don't want to, you want a drink on a Saturday afternoon, just, and something that just you like and it's easy, but you don't have to put a lot of thought into it. It's not super expensive. It's not, I mean, and for me, this is kind of that. I mean, you can get serious with it. My daughter, the tennis player, was taught to make gnocchi from a little grandma in Cerro Lunga. And so she'll make gnocchi, she'll roll it out, she has it all ready. And then I'll do a blue cheese bechamel. And that with this,
Ooh,
like
wow.
it goes so floral.
Yeah.
Like that blue cheese kind of outfunks it. It's just really, really fun. We actually had this with some Szechuan food that wasn't super, super spicy. And it was amazing with that. It brought out kind of a sweet side of it. Yeah, very, very versatile, I think, with food, but delicious on its own, and kind of that acid just kind of keeps your mouth watering every time you take a sip.
Yeah.
Steffi, well, I loved it with oysters, but you've got a beet salad with feta, cranberry, and pistachio, and a lemon pear vinaigrette. You have pizza. And Scott thinks it'll even work with sorbet, which it actually might.
Oh,
and
that's a fun idea.
Scott, if you can throw in, if you remember what the orange wine from Austria you had, what grape that was in the chat, I'm interested because, I mean, if it was Gruner Veltliner, I don't think I've seen any skin contact Gruner Veltliner, so I'm wondering if it was another white, an Austrian white that you had. But yeah, Lynn and Mike are saying this is a hit for them, a fun wine, well crafted, and yeah, I mean, it's really, really fun and very eye-opening. And I think it's one of those that, yeah, if you pour this by the glass, if you see, it's definitely, there are going to be people who buy this because they think, oh, haha, the great label. And then it's really going to kind of blow their mind in terms of taking them to a level of depth. It's like a fun little, mini series that suddenly has a real strong message to it. And you're like, oh, or when, the Real Housewives get serious about a topic, all of a sudden, that's kind of what this is.
No, this wine's better than that.
I don't know. When
it does not deserve a correlation.
The very special
to Real
episodes
Housewives.
of the Real Housewives are pretty darn good. So
it is, but this wine is more serious than they can ever even attempt to be.
Fair enough.
But I hope this, for those who had negative impressions of orange wines, I hope this might have been a good introduction. What's fun about orange wines, when they're done well, I mean, it's really just leaving white wines on the skins to give color, the way you would take red wines off the skins faster to have less color for a rosé. So it is a very fair category of wine. It's just that there are so many that came out at first that were part of the natural wine movement and were a little more funky than tasty.
Well, yeah, or there are a lot of the Eastern European wines which have very long ancestral histories, but are done in a much more herbaceous, savory, almost briny style, and can be very off-putting to people. I've had some, Georgia is kind of the original location for a lot of orange wines, or at least a lot of.
Well, those wines can look like lava lamps too.
Yeah.
I mean,
but first of all, shame on you. They call it amber wine. They do not call it orange wine. They don't like the term orange.
Yeah, but amber wine sounds like, like sweet rosé that you'd give to a 16-year-old.
Amber wines. And the same thing if you talk to Infriuli Grosvenor. The serious people who make wine in amphora in Europe, who are, leaving it in amphora for years, do not like the Americanized phrase of orange wine, because they find that to be less serious and less consistent.
We should also mention that Allison is partially sponsored by the Georgian Ministry of Tourism. So.
No, but when I was there, the wines I had were incredible.
Right.
And
who paid for your trip over there?
Huh?
Who paid for your trip over there?
Wines of Georgia.
Right, exactly. I rest my case, Your Honor. Awesome. No, this is fun, and I love this, and I'm excited. It's very exciting to hear that this is one of your most produced wines, because you would think it might be a Sangiovese or a Nebbiolo or one of the more traditional Italian varietals, but to hear that a blend, an amber wine blend, is among your best produced and biggest sellers. That's very exciting to hear.
Yeah, it's very well received usually in the market, and yeah.
Excellent. Well, speaking of well-received wines, let's move on to the 2022 Barbera. Of course, a staple of the Piemonte region, originally planted because Nebbiolo takes just so damn long to age and barrel, and they needed something to drink right now, so they put the Barbera cuttings in the good soil, aka the nutrient-rich, or the bad soil, I should say, aka the nutrient-rich soil, and would harvest and turn these grapes around. But I mean, for my money, I certainly love a good Nebbiolo, but I think, a great Barbera, d'Alba, d'Asti are second to none, and some of my favorite drinkable wines out there. So how did you guys come around to Barbera?
So we were in the town of Alba in 2007, and there happened to be a Barbera festival going on there for local little winemakers. And we walked in, and we had our Giornata business cards, and so they said, "Oh, you can come in an hour early because you're industry." And we were like, "Great!" So we started kind of going from table to table. And all of the wines were this easy drinking, lunchtimey, delicious, high acid, no tannin, just, I should say quaffable, but I'm going to say poundable.
There you go.
Red wines. And they were so, so good. And we got to about the 6th or 7th table, and the gentleman spoke amazing English. And so we started talking a little bit. And yeah, he very much, I explained how delighted I was with this style of wine. And I said, we don't always get this in the United States. They seem to send us the expensive stuff in all the oak. But this lighter, Alba style, I mean, is unbelievable. And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, we have to have something to drink while you wait for Nebbiolo to age. So he was completely exactly what you said. And I thought, wow, drink me now reds. Like what a concept. So we came back to the US, and in 2008 made our first Barbera. We sourced the grapes, and Barbera was not easy to find. It was planted in like the really hot, flat, sandy vineyards that, I mean, it felt kind of like it was like the Twinkie of
Right.
Like,
yeah. It's like, if we can't plant Zin here, we're going to plant Barbera.
And they were just kind of weird, like 1 acre plots here and there and all over. And, but we made it the first time. We put it into neutral barrel. We waited about 8 months, and then we were like, no, too long. It was too long. So we've kind of adjusted our style. When these grapes come in, they're destemmed immediately, go through fermentation, fast and furious. 7 days, it's done. We press it off when it's dry, goes into stainless steel, hangs out until about the second week of February, and then we throw it in a bottle. So no malolactic fermentation, I think, ever happens on this wine. At least, I mean, we don't inoculate that.
Yeah.
And just easy going. And I mean, I just opened a fresh bottle and poured a glass. And I mean, the first thing I smelled was Flintstone vitamins, which ages me, but I'm only 34.
You're a Flintstones kid, 10 million strong and growing.
But
yabba dabba do.
That aroma is something I smell when I'm doing the punch downs in the cellar. I smell that vitamin-y sort of aroma.
Yeah. And it's got that chalky.
And it's chalky. But the fact that we can capture that, it's a primary aromatic. It's so exciting to me. And I think everyone probably thinks I'm a big dork now, but I don't know. It's just really cool.
You're amongst dorky friends. You're fine.
It's fresh. It's got a little of that irony kind of thing. There's a little floral. There's a little anise in here. But on the finish, it's just smooth. And then you get that acid, and you're just like, oh, I don't know. On a hot day in the summer, throw this in the refrigerator, drink it cold. It's amazing. I mean, it's a great little wine.
Absolutely. And it's, one of those things that you don't find a lot of in Paso Robles because of the heat, and they tend to have the high alcohol, is those low alcohol, high acid, really chillable red wines that can be enjoyed in hot temperatures with barbecue, with things like that. Interestingly enough, I feel like the epicenter of Barbera in California is the Sierra foothills. I've seen a ton of plantings up there, and I'm not sure what it is about that environment because it does have very similar climates to Paso Robles. I'm wondering if it was just
I think they generally have more Italian varieties planted in that region than we do here.
That's true. Yeah, there is a lot of Sangiovese grown there, and
a lot of people with last names that end in vowels.
That's true.
Do you have one yourself?
I do.
Yes.
Exactly. But it's interesting when you taste this wine. It's got all the Matt. You're private messaging me everything. You got to send it to the group, Matt. He has wild mushroom risotto.
All right, and Mike just made the ultimate dad joke, which he said, since it's got a Flintstone vitamin nose, it would be a Hanna Barbera. Wah, wah, wah. That's Lynn. Oh, Lynn's making mom jokes. You can use that, Steffi. It's free of charge.
I will.
But what's great about it is it's got this very soft, drying tannins that you hit on the front of the palate. Your tongue gets dry, you kind of feel it on the roof of your mouth. And then the minute you stop with the texture, you realize it's so juicy on the back. It's just a mouth-washing juiciness that it's this interplay of tannins and acidity that's really lovely on this wine.
So she has her mouth full.
Yeah, it's a great little wine, and I love having something that's a drink me now. Yeah.
So I'm curious about we're kind of talking about the wines and talking about your story. So you and Brian are at Fresno State. It's your last year. It's his first year. How did you ultimately discover Paso Robles and come to settle in this area?
That's a good question.
That's a good transition.
So plan A was to move to Italy and never come back. So my husband had lived in Tuscany 2 different occasions. Once he lived in a language school in Florence, just to understand speaking the language, how Italy works. And then when he actually came back from that trip from Florence, he went to the grocery store and went to the pasta aisle and went, "Oh my God, this is pure crap." And in the back of his head, he always had, I'm gonna make my own pasta. I'm gonna start a pasta factory. But he did not disclose this until after we were married with kids. So we just thought we would, after we were done at Fresno State, we would move to Italy and make wine there. We had jobs set up. We had a place to live. We started doing the dual citizenship paperwork. We were getting married very shortly after that. And we found we were pregnant with twins. And I said, "Why don't you go and I'll come later?" And we'd been to northern Italy, in Piemonte, in that rural region, and the hospitals there look like where I take my dog. And I thought, I can't have 2 babies at the same time in this. What if something goes wrong? Like, what if there's no neonatal unit? And I wasn't trying to be type A, but I was trying to be cautious at the same time. Yes. So we decided to stay here and kind of explore the idea of starting our own Italian winery here, kind of as a way to bring Italy to us. So we started researching the new clones of Nebbiolo that came over in the late I think it was like 1999. Nova Vine Nursery brought in new clones. The existing clone right now, you could get clone 1, which is the rosé clone, and they found it's not even really Nebbiolo. It's actually a cross and not 100%. So we called around. I called up to Nova Vine Nursery and I said, "Hey, I don't know if you can do this, but do you have a list of people that have bought these vines? I would love to research them, talk to the people that are growing them." So 4 people had bought them in 4 years, which is not a good track record. Some people had pulled them out already. There was one guy up in Napa that didn't want to talk to us because we weren't going to join his wine club and give him a lot of money.
Wow.
And then we found this one in Paso Robles. And so we called and left a message, and the owners called me back the next day and they said, we don't live on the property, but we're going to be here this weekend. If you can come over, come over. So I sent my husband, who knows winemaking very well, but doesn't really understand vineyards. But I sent my best friend with him to be the eyes and ears and understand the soil and ask the questions I would have asked while I was there. So I was a wine steward in a restaurant and starting to get large. And so they came back and my friend Trey said, you have to go check out this vineyard. You have to go check it out. This is like, you have to. So maybe 3 weeks later or so, we drove over again and they were harvesting the walnuts. So I was down on my hands and knees, putting walnuts in bags, and everyone's pointing at me going, oh God, can she get up? She's huge. And, wow. And so I did.
Okay, so we have unreported child labor and now unreported prenatal labor. Interesting.
So they were full term. They were very happy. They would still be in there probably if they could. But yeah, so that was in November. Oh, so that was in October, first part of November. And then they said, if you want to come back next weekend, we're not selling the Nebbiolo. Whatever you can pick, you can just have. Oh, so we said, great, let's do it. So 2005, that was our first vintage of Nebbiolo. We made 1 barrel. That's all we made of all wine. And that's what started it.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Was this little vineyard called Lunamata?
This vineyard was called Lunamata, and they after we picked the grapes, and it was between Christmas and New Year, the couple called and said, I know this is a crazy question, and I know that you just had 2 babies, but would you be willing to help us with vineyard and kind of be a vineyard manager, and part-time is all we can afford and probably all you have time for. So that's what brought us to Paso Robles. Was an opportunity for me.
Amazing story.
And that was in what year that you came to Paso?
I moved here full-time in 2006, and then Brian, we still owned a house in Fresno, so we went back and forth, but mostly I was here with the girls.
You made Nebbiolo from that vineyard for 15 years.
From 2005 until 2021. Yeah.
Wow. And then was it sold, or did you guys buy it, or
that vineyard?
Don't leave us hanging.
Was purchased by a large winery in Paso Robles, and we had a. I'm not going to go there. So
no, Chris knows exactly.
They ripped out all the vines and put in Cabernet, and then sold for
close to $1 billion.
Well, they'll get $1 billion if they do well this year.
Right, which they're going to get called on that.
Yes.
So yes, but it kind of goes into the whole argument of these forgotten grapes. Like, to think about this beautiful vineyard. I had the pleasure of tasting that Nebbiolo I had your last vintage, and just such a beautiful wine, and just to think it doesn't make as much money, let's say, as a Cabernet can, as grapes sell, but they took up 20 years of history to put in a moneymaker, an overpriced moneymaker.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad, and that's why we celebrate the forgotten grapes, because if we don't appreciate them, and especially old vines and things, people are just going to pull them up to put in more financially beneficial vineyards.
It's true. But I mean, the upside of that is that you guys now have your own vineyard where you've got your own Nebbiolo planted.
And we planted our own Nebbiolo, and we've harvested now 2 vintages, which has been amazing. And what's cool for me was I got paid for several years to really learn how to grow that grape. And I shaved off a lot of time, frustration, and the vines are amazing. I mean, they're super promising, and everything that's come in so far, stellar. So yes. 22 and 23.
I know we're kind of veering away from Barbera, but since Pinot Noir is known as the heartbreak grape, I had always heard that Nebbiolo is the grape that you work with when you've mastered Pinot Noir, which sounds like its own high degree of difficulty, basically.
It is. None of these are interesting, and I mean, Nebbiolo leafs out on Valentine's Day, so it's 3 weeks before everything else. You've got to learn how to, I mean, you're dealing with different pests then, and then it's 8 inches tall when everything else is leafing out. So it's doing something different. It's like having like a 3-month-old, a 9-month-old, and a 4-year-old sometimes in a vineyard. You're like, how do I handle all these like needs for all of them, or they're at different stages?
Does that mean that every Nebbiolo bunch comes with its own Stanley Cup? Because that's typically who I see with those kids.
Yes.
And of course, Nebbiolo is a grape that, existed here in Paso Robles for quite some time, I think, of like Caperone
Yes.
vineyard, which I think was one of the original plantings of Nebbiolo here back in like 79 or 80, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been around a long time, and just, I don't know. He's really cool. He's the real deal. If you're ever in Paso Robles, go to Caperone Winery just to hear the story. Most likely from the guy who did it, and he wanted to make wines that tasted like his dad's wines that he made in the bathtub. I mean, it was, it's so real. You can't help but love it.
And you're literally in his barn with like a whiteboard with, grease paint on it, with his wines that are obscenely priced for the quality that you're getting. I mean, I used to buy Caperone. I would come up here and buy from Dave his bottles at just a pittance for the quality of Nebbiolo he was doing, and then sell them at my wine shop for a lot more, but not nearly as much as I could compared to a Gaia or some of the greats from Nebbiolo, but or from Barolo and Barbaresco, but still that classic like rose tar combo, just bright orange, beautiful stuff. Another vine that he was, I believe, one of the first in California, if not the United States, to plant is our fourth wine. That's what they call a segue, which is the Aglianico, the jewel of southern Italy, if I do say so myself. Some would argue Primitivo, but I love a good Aglianico. Go ahead, Allison.
Some say it's the Barolo of the South.
Some say it's the Barolo of the South, which I think is a nice way to put it. Oh, thank you, Patty and David. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Private message, but that's all right. So take us through your love affair with Aglianico, and this one again comes not from your own vineyard, but from a really historical vineyard in Paso Robles, one of the real famous, especially when it comes to Italian varietal vineyards, the French Camp Vineyard.
Yes. So it was interesting because as I took the job at Lunamata Vineyard, there was Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, and there was Aglianico there, which I didn't know much about. And Brian, my husband, said, "Oh my gosh!" When I worked in Tuscany at Isola Elena, he said when harvest was totally finished, he worked with a guy with the last name Paternoster. So they jumped in the car together, went down to the town of Barile in Basilicata, and he worked the Aglianico harvest.
Oh.
So he had actually some experience with this grape as well. The Lunamata was very different, and we actually had a contract where we were selling most of it, but we were interested in Aglianico for sure. So we started making it on its own. And I got a call one day, and it must have been, we purchased the Barbera in 2008 from French Camp Vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a call from the vineyard manager that next year, and he said, I really liked meeting you, and I want to talk to you about the Aglianico. And I said, okay. And he said, well, I've got 10 acres of it. I don't really know how to farm it. I planted it for Randall Graham. I think it was either the Big House Red or whatever other big wine that they made.
Yeah. The Cigar Volante Red.
The wine group bought that label and did not want the Aglianico anymore. So he said, I don't know what to do with these 10 acres of Aglianico, and wondered if you would like some. And I said, can I come up there and let's chat? So I went up, and Hank Ashby was his name. So for those of you who don't know French Camp Vineyard, it's owned by the Miller family. So same people as Biennacido and Solomon Hills. This is their Paso Robles project. It is so far east, my husband calls it West Bakersfield. It's not that far east.
It is.
But it's right before you get to the Carissa Plains. And the last couple of years, or last year, as you heard about the wildflowers in Paso Robles, it's right there. It is right off Shell Creek Road. It is right there. But so I went up to French Camp and met with Hank, and we came up. I said, you know what? Let's do 2 acres, and you should graft the rest. I'll take an acre, and I called my buddy Chris Ferrara from Creston Winery, and he takes an acre. And I said, let's graft the rest, do whatever you want with it, but I can commit to these, and I will sign a long-term lease, and we'll get it figured out. They farm it the same way as they farm their certified organic properties, and we went up and built like a compost tea brewer one year, and spent a lot of time up there. Yeah, it's really awesome. But this is so different than the Lunamata that we had to give it its own label. So actually, as we did this label, this was the first wine that we moved from printed labels in San Luis Obispo, physically printed, embossed, and the foil and all that kind of stuff. And we actually moved to digital printing. So these are our digital labels, and we bought them from a place up in Mountain View, and they sent us the first year they sent us the proof, and I was like, well, that looks right. It's a white label, and the crest had kind of this bluish kind of metallic color to it. And then they showed up, and they were effing black with pink on it. And I was furious, and Brian was furious. So Brian called him up, and he was like, dude, these are the opposite of what we, signed the proof for. And they said, well, that was a negative. We were like, what? Like,
why did they send you the negative?
We were like, winemaking stuff is hard. But now when people would call, they would say, hey, do you still have the Aglianico? And we could say, was it a black label or a white label? So it actually worked out great. So many mistakes are unbelievable things. So, Anyway, Aglianico, for those of you who don't know, Southern Italian grape, the Barolo of the South, always grows on volcanic soil. So Mount Vesuvius in Campania, Mount Volturre in Basilicata, and just always picks up flavors from those soils they're grown in. Even in Pompeii, as they were excavating the sites, they found pieces of amber, vines covered in amber, and they pulled out the genetic material, and it's identical to what you're drinking today. This grape has not changed in thousands of years, or a couple thousand years. And it's just so amazing. I mean, what I love about this is it's got pretty gnarly tannins on the end. It's big. It's got this real violety kind of thing on the nose that I absolutely adore. It's earthy, it's spicy, it's fruity, it's dusty almost. But for me, it's not anything in any direction. I love this with pizza, Calabrian chili oil, lamb with some Moroccan spices on it. It can handle spice, whereas like the Barbera kind of falls apart with spice. But it's just really fun. I love this is the one I drink a glass of while I'm cooking at home by myself, and then polish the bottle off with dinner.
Well, it's got that Barolo, that Nebbiolo combination of higher acidity, but then the tannins aren't overpowering, but they're definitely present and add more body. So you have that like high acid, high body, which, can definitely counteract spiciness, as opposed to Barbera, which tend to be high acid, but very soft body to them in that sense.
And hence, you now know why it's called the Barolo of the South.
Although, to go Allison on everybody, if we're being correct, it should be the Nebbiolo of the South, because Barolo is a region, not...
No, but there's a reason why. No, there's a reason why. Barolo of the South, because Barolo, the Nebbiolo Barolo tends to be more masculine, a bigger style, bigger tannins. Barbaresco tends to have a little bit more femininity to it. And so they're likening it to the bigness. It's not a Longue Nebbiolo by any chance.
Right. That's sexist, but that's okay. No, this is delicious. And it's, it's another one of those grapes that I have to ask you, why do you think that Italian varietals haven't taken off here in Paso Robles as much as they should? Because it really feels like we have the environment for grapes like Barbera, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Aglianico, Primitivo. You see them in pockets here and there, but for some reason, obviously Cabernet you can understand, but we've really sort of adopted the Rhone style of things.
Well, so I feel like honestly, so we explained earlier we have the pasta factory. We have the little Italian market also where we sell the pasta and some Italian kind of goodies. And then next door there's a restaurant that we have partnered with, and it's been a little over a year now, about almost a year and a half actually. And it's interesting. We have an all Italian wine list, and when folks come in and sit down, it's intimidating to look at something and be like, I don't know what that word is. And is that a grape? Is that
Right.
a region? Is that an STD? Is that, I mean, what could this be? I don't know what any of this is. So with many of these grapes comes a lot of education and talking and finding a connection. And I think you don't always have that, especially in every wine shop. I mean, a lot of times there's somebody there selling the wine, but not in a grocery store, not, yeah, I mean, it comes with education, and it comes with becoming familiar, being able to pronounce these. Yeah, we were just in Japan with the Wine Institute, and it was interesting going from Tokyo. There was definitely people with more wine knowledge, and then on to Osaka, where no one wanted to ask questions. And I asked someone afterwards, no one was asking any questions, and they said they didn't want to embarrass themselves by not being able to pronounce a lot of the things. But I think that runs through with so many cultures also. And here,
say, that's like going from Houston to Dallas in terms of wine knowledge as well.
Yes.
So,
yes. So I think that's part of it. And yeah, I mean, at one point we had a winery called Broadside, and we made Cabernet. We made a little bit of Merlot, and we would sell 100 cases of Cabernet to 1 case of Merlot. And that's what people buy. They go to the store, Cabernet. I know I like it. I know I'm going to drink it. I know what it's going to be. I have experience with this.
No, that's an interesting point. But at the same time, I would say that, grapes like Viognier and Mourvedre, even Grenache to a certain extent, Syrah, had that same learning curve. And I'm wondering if it's that sort of that French bias, where,
Robert Parker was very helpful in giving those wines high scores and making everyone else want to plant them and want to be Justin Smith.
Yeah.
But you also have to think what you just mentioned. Some of those grapes, Chris, have had as much trouble.
Well, they have, but
I just submitted a story. The Rhone grapes got their popularity much later. It wasn't until the 80s or in the 90s really that they started.
Yeah.
Because it was really Burgundy and Bordeaux. It was Cabernet. It was Pinot. It was Chard. It was Sauvignon Blanc. But Viognier and Grenache and Syrah really weren't planted because Rhone was lesser known, and it wasn't until a few intrepid importers started bringing those wines over that producers wanted to plant it. And that didn't happen until the late 80s at best. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it does feel like the grapes that sort of rise to the top have those specific regions, Barolo, Barbaresco, Montepulciano or Montalcino in Tuscany for Sangiovese. Obviously, the Northern Rhone and Syrah, Hermitage and Côte Rôtie, Burgundy, Bordeaux. And I guess, yeah, especially like in Southern Italy, there's not that one, like Basilicata, like hasn't risen to the only one that I feel like is sort of maybe on the cusp would be Mount Etna with the Nerello Macalese, where I feel like you're starting to see a little bit more of like the Etna Rossos and that grape being developed into call it premium cru, super cru, whatever you want to call it, but really defining that territory.
Yeah.
where it feels like the rest of Italy hasn't quite caught up to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I do think going back to the 1990s, there was the Calatal movement also. And I think people, I mean, in the early 1990s, I mean, Napa Cabernet was 11.5% alcohol. It was really delicious. It was meant to age. And then you had this thing in the 90s that was like this hang time, and wine really shifted. And then I think there was a lot of stuff that happened during those years. And the Calatal, I don't think came out on top at all.
I blame Bill Clinton.
What happened with history. But I will say this. So Andrew Jones is our next door neighbor with Field Recordings Winery, and he also works for Sunridge Nurseries. Right now, you cannot place an order for this year for anything Italian because it's all being planted in California. It is the hottest thing going out of the nursery right now. And so I think people have caught on. I sat on a panel in Milan in November, and we talked a lot about
humble brag.
Well, it was so we went, and Italians are not good at telling you what's going on at all. You just go with blind faith that it's all going to work out. And when we got there, it was a Brunello di Montalcino tasting, and I'm like, oh yes, like this is great. But I was on the panel that was talking about taking a variety out of its indigenous place, putting it somewhere else, and talking about what do you gain, what do you lose, how do you, is authenticity. We really talked a lot about authenticity. Last weekend there was a couple here and they tasted the Barbera, and the guy was like, I've never tasted anything like this. We drink Barbera all the time from the Sierra foothills, and it's 16% alcohol, and it's filled with oak, and it's a big wine, and it has tannin and this and this. And I just thought, well, they're not making it really, they're making it California style.
Yeah.
And that's great. And right now, Mount Etna, there are some wineries going on the international track of starting to make those varieties with a lot of oak, with a lot of some a little more ripe, higher alcohols. So you always have this kind of split everywhere you go. But I do think you're going to see more Italian varieties in California in the very near future.
Don't you think, twofold, I think from what I've heard from other people, and I know you and I have spoken about it, some of these Italian varieties, and Vermentino is a perfect example, are very heat resistant, drought resistant, and that's why they'll thrive as we get warmer and warmer. Because I've heard many winemakers, not just in Paso, in Napa and Calistoga, in Dry Creek, who think Vermentino is the answer to the future. I mean, Dan from Massican will tell you Vermentino is the answer. Because they see how Italian grapes are. But I also think that as much as there's that big style of wine, that California style that draws winemakers to make wines out of whack, even in countries that shouldn't, there's also a big move towards lighter style wines now. I mean, Italy went through the same thing. Italy, home to all those indigenous grapes. I mean, Piedmont has so many incredible grapes in addition to Nebbiolo, Barbera, and Dolcetto. Even Dolcetto got shit upon for a while, but I mean, they've got Grigniolino, they've got white wines, they've got Timarossa, and I mean, they've got
Albarossa, Pella all sorts of great grapes.
So many great grapes that went out of fashion when light-colored red wines went out of fashion. When there suddenly was this thing that you shouldn't be able to see through your red wine, it should be so opaque that like it was tar. That's when people didn't want pale red wine. Pale red wines tend to have a lot of texture and flavor. And what's great about this is it's darker in color and it's got a richer nose. But when you taste it, it's light on the palate. It's not a light wine. It's medium body, but it's not weighty. It doesn't knock you off. It doesn't.
No, that high acid, it finishes so cleanly that you don't have that long lingering finish that I think a lot of people equate with heavier wines. When it cleans the palate like that, it tends to feel fresher, lighter. It brings more of that mouth-watering, that kind of salivation aspect to it.
Yeah, and chances are they're lower alcohol as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of Italian varietals, one of the things that is so exciting about what you and Brian are doing is really pushing the envelope and bringing a lot of these unusual, lesser known grape varietals into California. You know, obviously tonight, even outside of what we've tasted, we've had Fiano, Falangina mentioned here. But you know, you mentioned working with Nero de Troya, and I know you guys have our friend Clive Pinder has planted some grapes for you guys. So it sounds like
Yeah.
you're really doing some fun experimentation with
Absolutely.
a lot of interesting grapes.
Well, and I think part of that too was losing our kind of what we kind of considered our estate vineyard, and farming that for, or I leased that vineyard for a couple years. And, you know, for first year, I was kind of salty. And I mean, I think it forces you to think, well, what do I really want to do? And I mean, when we're in Rome, the natural wine movement is amazing, and bringing these indigenous, right now Italy's having this revelation, which I think nothing changes in Italy. Everything's in stone. It's already been discovered, right? Because they're however many years old. But they're having a revolution right now with these indigenous varieties, and they're so excited about it that I get excited about it. And then we come home and I figure out ways to make that happen here. So yeah, we're the first to plant the Nero de Troia, where it's the first to plant the Cesanese. We are getting some Nerello Mascalese, but that we're not the first. But there's so many cool things we can do, and you just do it small, and our winery is not growing. I think we're the only winery in Paso that's like, no, we'd be happy to shrink a little bit, because I'd rather educate and focus on just making really great wines and not making any more of them. I mean, we don't need to grow. They all
No,
sell out every year, and yeah, we're happy.
yeah. And I think that's what's so interesting about you guys is you very easily could have gone the like, you know, huge tasting room on your vineyard or on a vineyard route, you know, 46 West type of thing, but you're still, you know, in there in Tin City, you know, you've got neighbors to the left of you, neighbors to the right of you. You're just kind of keeping that small, easygoing vibe. The operation is small. I mean, you know, it's really kind of you, Brian, and Shane as sort of the front of the house, which is great.
Yeah.
So you're really keeping it intimate, even though you're expanding and, you know, traveling to Japan and Korea and, you know, demonstrating your wines in all these amazing foreign countries. It's pretty amazing.
Tell everyone just a little bit how you ended up becoming a major player in making pasta.
Yes.
When your husband invested in just a little machine.
Yeah, so I already said when my husband came back, he couldn't figure out why there wasn't any good pasta on the grocery store shelves compared to what he had been eating the past 8 months or so. When he was in Florence, one of his first assignments was, okay, take your money. You're going to go to the market, and not like supermarket, like the market where each person sells something, and create a meal. And then we'll come back and we'll all cook it together. So of course my husband was all excited, and he went up and he had the money figured out, and he was like, I want to buy some mushrooms. And so he was like, you know, he asked the lady, said, I would like to buy some mushrooms. And he was so proud that he said it correctly and everything. And she said, quanti etti? And he was like, what? She said, quanti etti? And then kind of, how many etto do you want? And everything is sold over there in units called the etto, and it's roughly it is 100 grams, so it's roughly a quarter pound. But he was like, I don't know what an etto is, and he was terrified. And so he thought, if I get two, I either have to come back or I just throw a little bit away. It'll be fine. So he's like, due etti per favore, due. And so he got the two. So anyway, we learned a lesson. But the name of the pasta factory is Etto, so kind of named after this experience. But yeah, we decided to make fresh and dry pasta. So it's available to buy at the market, and then we service quite a few local restaurants with the fresh. And then the dry now is goes in boxes, and it goes all over the place, or starting to.
We just got some on Friday as part of our Hartley Farms box.
Oh,
So,
awesome. Yeah.
yes.
And aren't you also feeding schools?
Yes, so we do a school lunch program also. So it's half whole wheat, and then half the regular durum semolina flour. So it's a little bit higher in fiber and protein to match with what needs to happen for the schools. But yeah, we service Santa Maria School District, San Luis Obispo, Paso Robles, San Miguel, tiny little district. We just started with Monterey a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's really amazing.
They're the pasta royalty. And then something I learned, because now I will only buy Etto, and when I go to Paso, I'll buy the boxes, but I've also bought the big bags. But how many people eat pasta on a regular basis here? Okay, good. Most people are afraid of pasta, but Steffi, why do people have trouble with pasta that your pasta doesn't do? What is it that they put in those vineyards you were telling me?
Well, it's made with hard wheat, not soft wheat. So not the stuff that Wonder Bread is made of and lots of other cheaper pastas, but it's durum semolina. It's got 12 grams of protein per serving. It's made with the bronze dye. So as it comes out, it has little ridges all over it, and it has a lot of sauce that can stick to it. It's certified organic both in the field and at the mill, which is a big deal. Right now we're buying flour by the pallet, and we're about to change to getting flour by the truckload.
Wow.
So it's great when it's milled for us and then thrown into those bags or trucks. They don't have to spray it with any chemicals, and that's what a lot of people have the aversion to. It's not actually the gluten. It is it's the pesticides, herbicides, and the critters that could crawl through the flour.
Like rat poisoning.
Yes. Are there a lot of producers of durum semolina wheat in the United States, or was it that hard to find?
We sourced exclusively from Washington State for a while, and then with the droughts and the fires, that completely screwed all production up there. So right now we're sourcing from North Dakota, and it's good. I mean, I would love to have something closer, but it's just been really hard. Farming is just hard.
Yes.
And it hasn't been a good, easy couple of years. We'd love to get back to Washington State if we could, but we'll kind of see what happens. We've worked with the California Wheat Commission to crossbreed a durum semolina that would do well in more of an arid climate and lack of rain. So they've actually come up with a few things. We're testing a little bit out right now, and hopefully we can grow some of our own and then maybe have an Etto farm someday.
You're going to go buy land like east of Lost Hills and just start planting huge fields of semolina out there.
Yeah, that would just sit on a tractor all day.
No. You'll have the self-driving tractors.
You moved into a bigger factory, right?
We moved into a bigger factory, so it's 8,000 square feet, and we're starting to offer tours. They're not super exciting so far, but you get to see the gist of it. But later on, it'll get more fancy.
Yeah, because last time I was up there, well, one of the last times I was up there, you guys were just talking about signing the lease and moving into the big place.
Yes.
So, but organic pasta is the key.
Long time in the making.
Pasta every day. If you have a little bit of unetto of organic pasta.
Right. So since we're past 8 o'clock, we can kind of start to wrap things up. But I have to ask you, like, you mentioned you're, actually more comfortable probably shrinking Giornata than growing. But what is the future of Giornata? Obviously, you mentioned some of the grapes you're working with. Are there any grape varieties out there that you're just dying to work with or looking to plant, or what would kind of be your dream future for the winery?
That's a good question. We've started making some spirits. So we do like an aperitivo, an amaro, some different things like that. We have a Vinsanto that's kind of like a dessert wine, all kinds of different stuff. And I think we've kind of gone to kind of having like 5 wines that are kind of the bigger production, and then do like 75 cases of all the smaller things. But really, yeah, messing around with these varieties that aren't very well recognized. Grillo would be one. I would love to grow that. That would be amazing. Caricante would be cool too, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I kind of have a love-hate. I don't know. Anyway, but I love those wines, but I don't
both
know.
Both of those are Sicilian grapes we should throw out there. Yes. Grillo on the white side and Caricante often blended with the Nerello Macalese and a few others.
And then Nero d'Avola, we do have some in the ground right now, and we did bring in a little bit this year, which is great. I would love to plant Frappato. I would love to do a Nero d'Avola Frappato blend at some point. Frappato seems to be completely diseased, and they can't figure out how to get that disease out of it. It's been here for 4 years now and still not clean. So I don't know about that one, but
I feel
I
like
can only do 34 for so long.
you can only have so many 34th birthdays, right?
I know, right?
Yeah.
So
I feel like you and I need to sit down and talk about Galera and how to get and plant Galera.
It's available by a nursery, and people have it planted in California.
Okay, because this is my new holy grail, so we're gonna have to discuss this for.
So Galera is the grape that makes Prosecco.
Yes, which everybody knows about my new obsession with Prosecco these days. So. Which go great with your aperitivos. I need to come down and pick them up and do some blends.
And I'm also just about to share and put in the link the website for the Festival of Forgotten Grapes, which it's not officially launched. We will have ticket and sign up info, but you will be the first to see it. There you go.
Right. So you can all click through and take a look at all of the wineries that are going to be featured at the Festival of Forgotten Grapes.
You're actually getting to see it before I send it to all the wineries. So Steffi, you're the first winery to see it.
And you get to meet our special host of the festival, Farah Gotten, as we're calling her. So you will see Farah in full. It's going to be in downtown Los Angeles, Patty and David. The venue will be, yes, we're doing it in LA. The venue will be announced probably in the next couple of weeks. We're finalizing it. And then you all will be among the first to know when tickets go on sale. And we're going to have some fantastic VIP packages. We're actually going to be doing a little seminar before the grand tasting. And if you buy the VIP tickets, you'll get about 90 minutes before the regular crowd comes in to meet the winemakers, chat with them, taste the wines beforehand.
And I'm just going to correct Chris, or I'm going to call out Chris, who shunned your OrangoTango name, but loves to name website characters for brands.
I do. Farragotten was mine. Yeah, I'm fully
Speaking of
responsible.
Farragotten, and we take it seriously, but God forbid you put a monkey and OrangoTango on your label, and you can't be serious.
I haven't put Farragotten on a label yet, so you can criticize me when we get there. Stephanie, to wrap up, if folks want to come and visit you when they're in Paso Robles, if they want to buy more bottles, what's the best way to get in touch with you, to check out your website? Where should they go? Guide them.
Yeah, giornatawines.com. You can always make an appointment here at the winery. There's actually almost always someone here, especially between 10 and 5. We're here all 7 days. If you phone ahead or make an appointment online, we will be here and have a clean table waiting for you. Otherwise, no promises. but yeah, I mean, we try to be really accommodating, and yeah, if you're interested, and we would love to have you.
Awesome.
And go have lunch or dinner at Etto.
Yes.
And stop by the little market. If you've ever lived in Italy or spent time in Italy and gone into a little marketplace, when you walk into their little market, you will feel like you were transported to Italy. They've got fresh produce and meat. They've got all the pastas. They also have Italian products.
Yeah.
From toothpaste and mouthwash and lotion from Italy.
I feel like the one thing you're missing at both Edo and the restaurant and the store is a Paso Robles based Prosecco style sparkling wine made with Paso grapes. Hopefully we can figure out a way to alleviate this, because I think it would be just a great addition for what you guys are doing.
That would be pretty awesome. I agree.
If only somebody was making something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I
We'll
don't
see.
know. If
We'll
you
have
have
to
any ideas, let me know.
I'll yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk. Or maybe Stacy, Matt, and Rigo will talk with you. We'll see. But exactly. Awesome. Yes, shameless plug. Thank you, Scott. Or Scott. Scott can talk to you too. Lots of people can talk. Anyway, thank you so much. Do you mind? I know, you're here late, but do you mind sticking around for a couple of minutes if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask you any questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. So yes, this is the free-for-all portion. So before we do that, let me just again thank you, Steffi, for being here. We appreciate it. This was amazing. Your wines are truly fantastic, especially the OrangoTango. I take back everything I said. It is my favorite. I have already finished half the bottle, which is dangerous, but c'est la vie tonight. So keep an eye out next week for our next email offer for the April featured winery, which is going to be Wildflower Winery from Ventura County. Natalie Albertson is the winemaker. She is phenomenal, young, aggressive winemaker doing all natural wines. Really interesting stuff. We've got some wines that are going to be perfect for spring as weather starts to turn around. So keep an eye out for that email, because we are excited about working with Natalie. And she's another one that we believe is going to be at the festival as well. So we're excited to start featuring wineries that are going to be at our Festival of Forgotten Grapes. Okay. With that being said, go ahead.
And one thing, just to jump ahead, just, in the Italian theme, we will have Italian wines from Italy in our May bundle from a local importer. So you'll get a Nero di Troia and some of the grapes that Steffi's talked about today.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some really fun, truly forgotten grapes from Italy with our May bundle. We had such great success with the German wines last year with Lisa Two Pets and Two Pets Wines, a local importer, that we're going to be working in May with an Italian importer who we're going to have Brachetto d'Acqui and some really fun Italian wines. So keep an eye out for that one. That'll be in a couple of months, but Wildflower coming up in April. All right. That being said, if anybody has any questions or comments for Steffi or Allison, please feel free.
Or Chris.
Nobody wants to talk to me.
Yeah, these wines, they were so delicious. Like the orange wine is super unique, really fun. Like you said, the fun wines, the Barbera. I love how you said it's like quenchable, but then it's all like poundable, because you could just easily keep drinking that with a low alcohol content, but it's got a softness and a roundness to it. Really, really delicious. I was going to ask what wines of yours, because we will be ordering more, but what other wines would you recommend? And it's probably trying to ask you, like, pick a kid that
pick one
like
of your twins. Go.
Yeah. Who would you recommend? I mean, all of them I know are going to be amazing, but I'd love to hear some of your other favorites and thoughts on those.
We are just releasing Montepulciano, which we usually sell out of in about 3 or 4 months. And it's that wine where you smell it. It's got that, it's kind of like the Aglianico you tried, not quite as intense, but it's got more spice to it. And for me, it's like, if you have a bad day, you take a third of your refrigerator, you throw it in a pot, you cook it the rest of the day, you eat it, you feel better, and that Montepulciano will just hug you. Like, it's almost kind of a wintry, like, I had a bad day, this makes me feel better sort of wine.
It's the Italian mom of wines.
Yes, absolutely. But I'm really excited about that one. We have our new Il Campo Bianco that's actually almost like the OrangoTango, same sort of blend, but no skin contact. I used to call it the porch pounder. The 2023 is so serious. I mean, it's got this salinity to it that I have not gotten before. And we actually replaced the Fiano with Trebbiano. And I think that salinity is coming from the Trebbiano. I love it. It is one of, I tasted it and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, it was great. It was really fun to blend. Yeah, the new Vermentino is really good too, the 2023. This really has that almost kind of almondy sort of finish to it, but that acid that you can feel kind of down the sides of your mouth. Oh, and the 2021 Sangiovese, hands down, my favorite vintage we've ever made.
So apparently Portico Pounder is what you want to call it. Porch
Yeah.
pounder. There's no word for pounder in Italian, but Google Translate says Portico Pounder.
That's
And then best just to go to your website and order from you, or should we email you, or what's the best? I know Chris mentioned something, but I'm sorry, my son was talking, so I
Yes,
wanted
you
to
can
make sure.
definitely go to the website. You can either pick up here if you're ever coming through Paso Robles. You can stop in and taste. We can ship it to you. You can email me directly, Stephy, Stephy at Giornata plural.com.
And when we send out the link to the replay tomorrow, obviously we'll have Steffi's email on there, so you can reply to her
Awesome.
directly. Don't reply to Brian because he won't reply back.
No.
Brian is not the more social of the two.
Brian is like my girlfriend, a charismatic introvert. But he made a fantastic recommendation when Teresa and I were at the market one day, and he recommended the what are the little cracker things?
Oh, the Torali.
The Torale, but he had
Torali are
the
great.
Torale with like raisins and something else that
They're like Cipollini onions. Yeah.
yes, yeah, it was like raisin and onion, and it's like, really? And then you try them and you're like, oh no, I get it.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, they were very good.
I just wanted to say, you guys, I'm very excited about the Forgotten Grapes. I'm really looking forward to that. Allison, great to see you. Scott, welcome on camera. Nice to see your face. And then I wanted to say that I love the wines. I thought the Vermentino was amazing. I love the Barbera. The OrangoTango, was it acidic? Is there some acid to it? It just, or maybe it was how we paired it, but I thought it was acidic more than anything else. Your thoughts?
It definitely has acid to it. That Falangina, when we pull those grapes in, they're usually around 22 to 23 bricks, and the acid is like 3.1. I mean,
wow.
It's a very, very, very low pH. It has tons of acidity to it.
Yes.
Hey,
And
Matt, good to see you, but when I'm working at the Festival of Forgotten Grapes, I will not be drinking with you.
And not only do we get to see Scott, but we get to see Scott's dad.
I don't know what
his
that
mom
could be.
Dee
Allison,
right there as
Allison,
well. Yes.
Allison, you and I were very calm.
We were very calm. We were, but I'm not sure. When I got back to my room, I sort of woke up with French fries all over the floor.
Wow. Yes. You can drink with Allison after the Festival of Forgotten Grapes at the after hours party that we'll be hosting just for
It was a Pinot event. There was no spitting, and by the end of the night, I was really hungry, but apparently I was more tired than hungry, so I never finished my food.
Awesome.
But no, it's going to be fun, and I love the wines. The Barbera is just all the wines, time and place for everything.
Awesome.
Hey, Chris.
Yes. Yes, Doug.
I had asked you before, is Ken Volk still with us? Because we used to get a lot of wine from him. Did he pass? I know he was very ill.
So I know
I thought he passed.
No, I don't think he passed.
No, he had a crazy stroke.
Yeah, he had an ocular stroke, which basically not only sort of disabled him, but blinded him, and he was unable to make wine.
And his kids didn't want to take things over.
Kids didn't want to take over, so he put the winery up for.
Sold to their two brothers. Their last name is Nelson. It's Andrew and Evan Nelson. They have multiple brands kind of under their portfolio, but they have really left Bonnie Doon to kind of do its thing, which I think is really cool.
It's War Room Cellars is their name. Yeah.
Because he used to pour out of Byron's old winery.
He was,
and his tasting room in Santa Maria is closed. You can't get his. I don't know.
No,
I don't think he died.
I think you're right. I think he's still out there.
Barbara Smith is kind of running the kind of show, I would say,
Yeah.
there, and she's awesome.
Yeah, no,
really.
she's amazing. She actually, if you came, well, Doug, I don't think you would have, but we had we did a couple of Ken Volk tastings back at Forgotten Grapes back in the day, and Barbara was the one who came out and poured the wines. And I mean, I have talked about how Ken is on my Mount Rushmore of Forgotten Grape producers. And when I first came up to Paso Robles in 2003, it was months before he sold to Constellation Brands at the time, or actually it was the company that owned Jim Beam at the time that then sold to Constellation Brands. But yeah, that was when I first had his Tokai. Did not have the Vermentino, but it was the first Mourvedre I ever had. It was the first Tempranillo.
He did a Negrete, which was very
Negrete. Yeah, Negrete.
Negrete,
He did Cab Pfeffer. You know, he was
do like that one actually.
He called them heirloom varietals. I call them forgotten grapes, but yeah, he is Bill Frick. There's a select few, Larry Schaefer, who are on my kind of Mount Rushmore of forgotten grapes, if you will. But he's amazing. But yeah, as far as I can tell, he is still with us, but sadly, I think I haven't even seen any Ken Volk wines, so I think they're out of inventory at this point and just living the legacy. So yeah, it's a